Hey groupers, Pastor Marshall here. Well, we continue our walk through John and we've made it to the 6th chapter, one of the most amazing chapters in the Gospel of John. I started off my message by talking about why we're in relationships with people. And so if you're married, why are you in a relationship with the person that you're married to? If you have a close friend, if you're close friends with someone, what is it about that relationship that allows you, that creates this closeness? What is the answer to why you're in these relationships? And then if you were like think of a scale 1 through 10, and 1 would be not superficial at all and 10 would be superficial, where would you put those relationships on that scale 1 through 10 of superficial, not superficial at all? Well, we find ourselves in the Golan Heights. Jesus is hanging out in the Golan Heights. We know right where this is, and so right now I'll throw a map up on the video and you can see where this area is. Big section that separates Israel from Syria today. And here's a picture of what the Golan Heights looks like as it's on the east side of the Sea of Galilee. You'll see the Sea of Galilee in this picture and just this lush green area. Well, now back to me. Why were so many people following Jesus? According to verse 2, what is their motivation? And what are the weaknesses of that kind of motivation? If that's what our faith is built on, what are the weaknesses that are just going to be wedded to that kind of faith? It appears that Jesus needs to get away from the crowds. What are the reasons that you think that Jesus is retreating? And then how many of those reasons would correlate to our own lives? What are the essential benefits of downtime? And what are the damages, the inevitable damages that will occur in our lives if we don't have downtime? Now, it says in verse 6 that Jesus asked Philip about where to buy food since he was from the area. And it says that this was to test him. Why does God test us? What is the purpose of God testing us? Now, this is the largest number of people that I've ever seen have a meal together. I wonder about you and your group. This is not a complicated question. What's the largest group that you have ever sat down and eaten with? And what was that like? What was it like practically? Maybe you were serving or maybe you were cooking. What was it like practically? And what's it like emotionally to eat in such a humongous crowd of people? I think of our Easter services. Well, in verse 14, the crowd states they believe that he is the prophet. And so I want you to look up Deuteronomy chapter 18, verses 15 through 19. Read that passage and read about what Moses' prediction was. And what is it now? What is it about this story that we just read that brings this prediction, brings this belief that Jesus is the one in this story? And then, why would they want to make Jesus their king? And how would they do that by force? That's very confusing to me. How could they make him their king by force? Is there any stories in the Old Testament that would give us some hint as the Israelites have done this before? Jesus has dealt with this temptation to be king, to be in charge before. And so turn to Matthew chapter 4, read verses 8 through 10. This is Jesus' temptation. This is the third temptation. And I want you to compare the two, this story to that story. And do the devil and the people have the same motivation to make Jesus a king? Now, verse 13 says that there were 12 baskets of leftovers. I want you to read the feeding of the 4,000 in Matthew chapter 15. Just start in verse 32 and read through verse 38. Make some quick notes about what were some differences in the details between the feeding of the 5,000 and the feeding of the 4,000. And one, of course, detail that you're going to notice is the different number of leftovers. And just as a teaching point, after you've talked about some of the details, the word basket that is used in all 4 Gospels for the feeding of the 5,000 is this word, it's this Hebrew word In the Greek is translated kophinos, and it's a Jewish, very specific Jewish handmade basket that everybody carried with them. It was their backpack, if you will. In the feeding of the 4,000, though, we have a very different word, a very unique word that is the word spirus, and it's a Gentile term. And so we have these two different kinds of words for baskets, and we have these two different numbers of people, numbers of baskets that were left over. And so you know that it has always been believed that the 12 baskets represent the 12 tribes of Israel. This was Passover. These were Jews that had come to enjoy Jesus' teaching and be fed. But in the feeding of the 4,000, he has gone into a Gentile territory, and so he's probably predominantly feeding Gentile people. And that number 7 has always been the biblical number for complete, for whole. And so, of course, the idea is that Jesus is going to provide the bread of life for the nation of Israel, but he's also going to provide the bread of life for the entire world. I just think that's a cool teaching. I didn't dig into that too much in my sermon, so we'll talk about it here. Well, we'll finish by just remembering our application. What defines your motivation to be in a relationship with Jesus? Is it because of his love for you and all that you get from him, because he's just the greatest lover? Or is it because that you are in love with him and you couldn't imagine being with anyone else? He is so amazing that you're in a relationship with him because you're in love with him. Well, I hope that you have a great group. Look forward to seeing you next week as we get to ourselves walking on water. God bless.